The storm came down on me like a verdict, somewhere in the hills of McDowell County, West Virginia, 1964, and for the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to be truly alone. The road had washed out behind me, the road had washed out ahead, and I sat in a rented car that would not move, watching the rain hammer the windshield like fists on a table, watching the fog erase the mountains one ridge at a time. And I understood something I had spent a lifetime avoiding. Fame cannot clear a road, money cannot stop a flood, and a man without shelter is just a man, waiting for something he cannot name. That storm. I will never forget that storm. Not just the sound of it, the weight of it, the way it pressed down on those hills like grief, like history, like something that had been gathering for 100 years and finally decided to fall. I had been in storms before, on film sets, in foreign countries, but nothing like this. This storm had memory. This storm had intention. I had driven out of Charleston that morning, chasing solitude the way some men chase applause. The map had seemed clear enough, the weather had seemed mild enough, but the road had narrowed. The pavement had cracked, the sky had darkened, and somewhere along the way I had made a choice that led me here. To nothing, to nowhere, to the kind of silence that makes you question everything you thought you knew. Then I saw the light. A farmhouse, set back from the road, barely visible through the rain, a single lamp burning in the window like a promise, like someone had left it there for a stranger who had not yet arrived. I remember thinking that light looked like the only truth left in the world. I left the car and ran, my shoes filled with mud, my coat soaked through in seconds. But I kept running toward that light. The porch was sagging. The wood was gray with age. But the door opened before I could knock, and a man stood there, tall, gaunt, his face carved by decades of hard living, his eyes the color of coal seam, the kind of eyes that had seen things underground that sunlight could never erase. He looked at me the way you look at a stranger who has wandered onto your land in a storm. Not with suspicion, with calculation. He was deciding how much this man would need. The answer apparently was everything. His name was Silas Brennan. He led me inside without a word, sat me by the fire, brought me coffee in a tin cup. His wife had died 3 winters back. He lived alone now. His children scattered to Ohio, to Pennsylvania, to anywhere. But here, I watched him move around that kitchen, every motion spare, every gesture deliberate. This was a man who had learned to waste nothing, not food, not words, not time, not grief. His hands moved with the certainty of someone who had spent 40 years underground, someone who knew that a wasted motion in the dark could cost you everything. I thanked him. I meant it more than I had meant anything in years. He sat across from me, studying my face. Then he spoke. "You look familiar." I told him who I was. I told him what I did. I told him I was traveling alone, looking for something I could not quite name. He nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something he had already suspected. "A man running from himself," he said. "Does not matter how famous he is still running." Before I could respond, there was a knock at the door. Silas rose to answer it. I heard voices, low, careful, and then footsteps. A second man entered the room. He was shorter than Silas, broader, his hands thick with calluses, his hair white as frost. He wore spectacles that caught the firelight, and when he saw me he paused, just for a moment. Then he extended his hand. "This is Elias," Silas said. Elias Haddon, my neighbor. Elias sat down at the table. Silas poured him coffee without being asked, and I watched them. There was something in the way they moved around each other, something practiced, something old. Silas passed the sugar before Elias reached for it. Elias refilled Silas's cup when it ran low. Their rhythm was seamless, the rhythm of men who had shared this table for decades. "You seem surprised," Elias said. I was. He smiled, a quiet smile that carried no bitterness. "Everyone is surprised. They expect us to hate each other. They have been told we must hate each other." I did not understand, but I would. The storm pinned me there for 3 days. The roads would not clear until Thursday. Until then, I was their guest. I should have been restless. I am not a man who sits still easily. Back in California, 3 idle days would have driven me half mad. I would have paced. I would have telephoned someone. I would have found a way to force the world to move at my speed. But something about that hollow held me in place. Something I needed to understand. On the second morning I learned the truth. We were sitting on the porch, watching the mist rise from the valley like smoke from a battlefield. The hills were so green they hurt to look at, and Silas began to talk. My grandfather, he said, worked the Pocahontas seam, joined the Union in 1912, marched on Paint Creek, fought at Cabin Creek, carried a rifle to Blair Mountain. He paused. Elias's grandfather. He was a surveyor, worked for the coal company, drew the lines that told us where we could live, where we could walk, what we could own. I looked at Elias. He was nodding slowly. My grandfather, Elias said, stood with the Baldwin Felts men, helped them evict the strikers, helped them burn the tent camps. He paused. In 1921, Silas's grandfather shot my grandfather's brother, killed him in the woods above Sharples, left him there for the crows. The silence stretched. I felt the weight of it. 100 years of blood and grief pressing down on that porch, pressing down on those mountains, pressing down on everything. I had read about the mine wars in books. I had seen photographs. But sitting there between these two men, I understood that history is not something that happened. History is something that lives. In the bones, in the blood, in the spaces between words. Silas spoke again. And in 1922, my grandfather died in a cave-in. The company said it was an accident. Everyone knew it was not. I looked from one man to the other. These were the grandsons of enemies, men whose families had killed each other, men whose ancestors had faced each other across rifle sights in the bloodiest labor war in American history. And here they sat, sharing coffee, sharing silence, sharing a life. How? I asked. Silas looked at Elias. Elias looked at Silas. And something passed between them that needed no words. It was Elias who spoke. 1947, he said. I came home from the war, Pacific Theater, Okinawa, saw things no man should see, did things no man should do. He paused. I bought the old survey cabin up the hollow, wanted to be alone, wanted to forget. Everyone warned me, said Silas Brennan lived just down the ridge, said his people and my people had been killing each other since before I was born. He looked at Silas. First week I was here, my well ran dry, no water, no way to dig a new one. I was going to have to leave, go back to the world, face everything I was running from. Silas picked up the story. I watched him struggling, watched him carrying buckets from the creek, watched him getting weaker every day. And I thought about my grandfather, thought about what he would have wanted. He paused. Then I thought about what I wanted, who I wanted to be. He looked at me. I walked up that hollow with a shovel, spent 3 days helping him dig a new well. Did not say a word about his grandfather, did not say a word about mine. Just dug. Elias nodded. When the water came up, he said, clear and cold, we just stood there looking at it, looking at each other, and we both knew something had changed. Something had been chosen. He lowered his voice. Hatred is a choice. We chose differently. I thought about that for a long time, thought about all the hatred I had seen in my life, on screens, in headlines, in the faces of men who believed their anger was righteous. And I thought about these two men who had every reason to hate and chose not to. That night I witnessed something I will never forget. It was past midnight. The storm had passed, but the darkness was thick. I woke to a sound I could not identify. Then I smelled it. Smoke. I ran to the window. Silas's barn was burning, flames climbing the old timber, sparks rising into the black sky like dying stars. I ran outside. Silas was already there, struggling with the barn door. The horses were screaming inside. And then I saw Elias. He came running down the hollow, 70 years old, bad knee, bad heart, running like a man half his age. He did not ask questions, did not speak at all, just grabbed the door beside Silas and pulled. The door gave way. Smoke poured out. The heat was murderous, and Elias went in. I watched him disappear into the flames, watched Silas try to follow, watched myself holding Silas back because someone had to, watched the roof beams groan and crack. Then the horses came out, running wild, eyes rolling white with terror. 2 of them, 3, a 4th, and behind them, Elias, his coat smoking, his face black with soot, carrying a calf in his arms. He staggered out of that barn and fell to his knees, and Silas was there, catching him, holding him, 2 old men, kneeling in the mud, while the barn collapsed behind them. The fire roared and cracked. Sparks swirled up into the darkness like prayers no one had asked for. They did not speak, not a word. Some things do not need words. Some things would be diminished by them. I stood there watching, and I understood something I had been pretending to understand my whole career. Justice is not written in courtrooms. It is written in a neighbor's burning barn at midnight, in the choice to run toward the fire, in the choice to save what matters, in the choice to be there when no one is watching and no one will ever applaud. The next morning I sat with them on what was left of the porch. The barn was still smoldering. The calf was in the kitchen. Elias had a bandage on his arm where the flames had caught him. "Why?" I asked him. "Why did you do it?" He looked at Silas. Silas looked at him, and both men smiled, the same tired smile. "Because," Elias said, "he is my neighbor. He is my friend. His grandfather shot my grandfather's brother, and I do not care. I do not care about any of it." He lowered his voice. "Every morning I wake up, and I choose who I want to be. I choose to see this man as my brother, not because our grandfathers were brothers. They were not. They were enemies. I choose it because that is the only way I know how to live with myself, the only way I know how to live at all." Silas nodded. "The grudge could have gone on forever," he said. "Our children could have hated each other. Their children could have hated each other. We could have passed that poison down for generations." He paused. "We chose to let it die with us. We chose to start something new." I drove away from that hollow on a Thursday morning. The roads were clear. The sun was out. The mountains were green and ancient and indifferent. A hawk circled overhead. Somewhere in the distance a church bell rang. The world had moved on, but I had not. But I was not the same man who had gotten lost 4 days before. I had spent my career playing righteous men, lawyers who defended the innocent, fathers who taught their children courage, men who stood for justice when no one else would stand. I had memorized their words, inhabited their convictions, made audiences believe that such men existed. But in that hollow between 2 ridges in West Virginia, I finally saw what righteousness looked like. Not performed, not applauded, not written by screenwriters and lit by professionals. Just lived, quietly, stubbornly, every single morning. I think about them still, more than I think about the awards, more than I think about the films, more than I think about any role I ever played. I think about a well dug in silence. I think about a calf carried out of a burning barn. I think about 2 old men whose grandfathers tried to kill each other sitting on a porch, drinking coffee like brothers. And I think about what Elias said. "Every morning I wake up, and I choose. That is all. That is everything. Some wrong turns lead exactly where you need to go. Some storms strand you exactly where you need to be stranded. And some lessons can only be learned in places where fame means nothing, where money means nothing, where the only thing that matters is the choice you make when no one is watching." I never saw them again. I do not even know if they are still alive, but I carry them with me, every day, every role, every time I am tempted to believe that justice is something that happens in public. Justice is not public. Justice is private. Justice is the choice you make at midnight when the barn is burning and no one will ever know. That is what they taught me. 2 old men in the hills of West Virginia, enemies by inheritance, brothers by choice. And that is enough. That is more than enough. That is everything.